A 7-year-old girl was thrown out of her house by her stepmother right after her father's funeral. Her little suitcase burst open on the wet driveway, drawings and clothes scattering in the rain. Her black dress clung to her legs. Her hands trembled as she knelt, pleading, "Please, don't make me go." The woman at the door only smirked, slammed it shut, and turned away. The neighbors watched in silence, until a millionaire in a gray coat stepped through the gate, lifted the soaked suitcase, and said one line that silenced everyone. Before we dive into this story, let us know in the comment section where you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. A week earlier, the Morgan mansion had been filled with flowers and whispers of sympathy. The funeral had drawn the city's most powerful names: bankers, investors, old friends from Boston's elite. But none of it mattered to the little girl standing beside the coffin. Lily Morgan clutched a silver pocket watch in her hands, the one her father had given her on her 7th birthday. She didn't cry anymore. Her tears had run dry after 3 sleepless nights. Cassandra Morgan, her stepmother, wore black from head to toe, her veil falling perfectly across her pale face. She had practiced sorrow the way others practiced piano. Each sob was delicate, measured, and for the crowd. Every time someone offered condolences, she tilted her head, accepted with grace, and whispered, "He was my whole world." But when she turned away, her eyes were dry and calculating. Standing near the back, Ethan Price watched quietly. He had been Thomas Morgan's business partner for years, and more than that, a close friend. He'd arrived too late to see Thomas before the end, something that gnawed at his chest like a slow burn. Thomas had been the steady one, the dreamer with both feet on the ground, the man who had lifted Ethan from nothing and called him brother. Now that brother was gone, and what remained felt wrong. Ethan's gaze moved to the little girl by the coffin. Lily's hair was tied neatly with a black ribbon, her small shoulders trembling under the heavy dress. A priest murmured prayers, but Lily's eyes were locked on her father's photograph. A smiling man with kind eyes and a hand resting protectively on her shoulder. When the service ended, guests began to leave, murmuring condolences. Cassandra stood near the door, shaking hands and thanking everyone for their kindness in such a difficult time. Lily lingered, unwilling to walk away. Ethan approached her gently. "Hey," he said softly, lowering his voice. "Do you remember me?" She looked up with tired eyes. "You were Daddy's friend." "That's right," he said, kneeling beside her. "He talked about you every day at the office. He said you were braver than anyone he knew." Lily's lips trembled into the faintest smile. "Daddy said that." Ethan nodded. "Every time you drew him something, he'd hang it on the board behind his desk." Her gaze dropped to the floor. "He said he'd come home early that night, but he didn't." Ethan felt a knot tighten in his chest. He wanted to, more than anything. Before he could say more, Cassandra's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Lily!" she snapped, her smile tightening for the crowd. "Come here, please, now." The girl flinched, whispered, "I have to go," and hurried to her side. Cassandra placed a hand on her shoulder, not gently, and turned toward Ethan. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Price. It's been overwhelming." Ethan studied her face, polished, perfect, and hollow. "Thomas was a good man," he said. "I'll check in to make sure everything's settled with the trust." Cassandra's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That won't be necessary. I'll handle everything personally." She turned away before he could answer. The conversation ended like a door slammed shut. That night, as the city lights flickered across the mansion's windows, Lily lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling. The house felt different now. Colder, quieter, too large. The hallway light was off. Her father's study, once filled with warmth and jazz records, was locked. She could still hear Cassandra's voice downstairs, speaking on the phone. "Sell the Mercedes," she said sharply, "and make sure the transfer goes through before Monday. The trust belongs to me now." Lily hugged her stuffed bunny, Snowy, tighter. Her small voice quivered in the darkness. "Daddy, please come back. I don't like it here anymore." The next morning, Cassandra appeared at breakfast in a silk robe and sunglasses. The long table that had once held 3 plates now had only 1. Lily stood by the doorway, barefoot, uncertain whether she was allowed to sit. Cassandra sipped her coffee. "Don't just stand there. Say good morning." "Good morning," Lily whispered. Louder. "Good morning, ma'am." Cassandra's lips twitched. "Better. You can have toast after I leave. I don't like being disturbed while I eat." Lily waited until Cassandra finished her breakfast and left the room. Only then did she pick up the crust of bread left on the tray. Mrs. Alvarez, the housekeeper, entered quietly, her kind eyes full of pity. "Eat slowly, sweetheart," she whispered. "You don't want her to hear." "Why doesn't she like me?" Lily asked, crumbs sticking to her fingers. The older woman sighed. "Some people forget how to love when they lose something. But you just keep your heart kind, okay?" Lily nodded, though she didn't really understand. A few days later, the mansion filled with laughter. Cassandra was hosting a dinner party, the first since the funeral. Her friends arrived in glittering dresses, pretending they weren't gossiping. Lily stayed upstairs, tracing drawings with her pencil. She heard glasses clink, music play, and Cassandra's laughter rise above it all. When the smell of roasted lamb reached her room, her stomach twisted painfully. She hadn't eaten since morning. She tiptoed downstairs and peeked into the dining hall. "Cassandra?" she asked quietly. "Can I have a plate, please?" The laughter died instantly. 12 eyes turned to the child in the doorway. Cassandra's smile froze. "Excuse me?" "I'm hungry," Lily said softly. "I just want a little." A sharp silence followed. Then Cassandra rose from her seat, the heels of her shoes echoing against the marble floor. She stopped in front of Lily, bending slightly. "I told you not to interrupt me when I have guests," she said, voice calm but venomous. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered. Without another word, Cassandra took the glass of red wine from the table and poured it across the floor near Lily's feet. "Clean it up," she said coldly. "If you want food, earn it." Lily's hands shook as she grabbed napkins and wiped the floor, her tears mixing with the spilled wine. One of the guests muttered, "Maybe that's too much, Cass." But Cassandra only smiled. She needs to learn manners. That night, Lily sat by her window, drawing quietly. She drew herself standing outside in the rain, holding Snowy. At the edge of the paper, she added a man in a gray coat, standing by a gate. She didn't know why, just that she wanted someone to walk through it. The next morning, Cassandra called her into the study. Stacks of papers lay spread across the desk. "Do you know what this is?" Cassandra asked, tapping one with a pen. Lily shook her head. "It's a signature authorization. When you're older, people will ask for yours. Remember this lesson. Never sign anything you don't understand." She smiled thinly, then pushed the papers aside. "But luckily for me, I understand everything." Lily didn't answer. She stared at the portrait of her father on the wall. Cassandra noticed and turned the frame around. "He's gone. Stop staring at ghosts." That evening, Mrs. Alvarez found Lily feeding a stray cat in the garden. You shouldn't be out here, she whispered. If she sees you, there'll be trouble. I can't sleep, Lily said softly. Snowy doesn't like the dark. The housekeeper hesitated, then crouched beside her. Your father once told me that if anything ever happened, I should protect you. But I'm afraid I can't do that anymore. She's letting me go. Lily's eyes filled with tears. You can't leave. Mrs. Alvarez placed something small in Lily's palm. A silver key. Hide this. It opens the study. Everything your father left for you is in there. She hugged the child tight before walking away, her figure fading into the night. The next morning, Cassandra's voice thundered through the hallway. Pack your things. Lily froze halfway down the stairs. Why? Because I said so. Cassandra's heels clicked on the marble floor as she descended. You're going to live somewhere else. You're not my problem anymore. But Daddy said, Daddy's not here. Cassandra snapped. And neither will you be. She grabbed the suitcase from Lily's hand and yanked it open. You won't need half of this junk. She flung the child's drawings across the hall, paper fluttering like broken wings. Lily dropped to her knees, scrambling to gather them. Please, these are mine. Out! Cassandra barked, her voice slicing through the air. The door slammed open, rain pouring in. She pushed Lily out onto the steps, suitcase tumbling after her. Lily fell, landing hard on the driveway. The wind howled, rain plastering her hair to her face. Through the blur of water and tears, she saw Cassandra's silhouette framed in the doorway. Please, Lily begged, please don't make me go. The woman only smirked. You never belonged here. The door slammed shut, and that was the moment the headlights appeared, a car slowing at the gate, stopping under the rain. A man stepped out, his gray coat whipping in the wind. He looked at the child kneeling in the mud, the suitcase overturned, the woman in the doorway. Without a word, he walked forward, picked up the suitcase, and met Cassandra's cold gaze. From this moment on, he said quietly, she's coming with me. The car doors shut with a soft click as Ethan placed Lily's suitcase in the trunk. He glanced back at the mansion once, the rain hammering against the dark windows, the weight of what he was doing settling heavily in his chest. He couldn't remember a time when he'd felt this certain about something. And yet, this certainty gnawed at him with a quiet urgency. As he got into the driver's seat, the heavy silence inside the car felt almost suffocating. Lily sat in the passenger seat, clutching Snowy tightly to her chest. Her eyes were red from crying, her cheeks streaked with rain and salt. Ethan glanced at her as he started the car. You okay? Lily didn't answer. She simply nodded, her small fingers tightening around the stuffed bunny. Ethan didn't push her further. He focused on the road ahead, the city lights of Boston growing brighter in the distance, a stark contrast to the somber mood in the car. He had meant to talk to her, to ask her more about what had been happening in the house. But as the rain continued to fall, all he could think about was the little girl beside him, lost, broken, and alone in a world that should have been her safe place. As they passed the exit for the city, Lily spoke, her voice barely audible. Where are we going? To my place, Ethan said softly, glancing at her. It's not much, but I think you'll be safe there, for now. Lily didn't say anything else. Her face was pressed against the window, her eyes following the raindrops as they raced each other down the glass. The streets of Boston blurred past, each turned deeper into the unknown. Ethan knew that his life, and Lily's, would never be the same after tonight. He'd seen too much, the coldness in Cassandra's eyes, the way she had thrown Lily out with barely a second thought. A motherly figure, sure, but one that had long since abandoned any semblance of love or warmth. It didn't take long to reach the apartment. Ethan's place was in a quiet corner of the city, away from the noise and bustle, tucked into an old building that had been renovated years ago. It wasn't grand, but it was his. He parked the car in the underground garage and got out, walking around to open the passenger door. Lily was still staring blankly out the window, lost in thought. "Hey," he said softly. "We're here. Come on, let's get you inside." Lily didn't respond at first. She simply stared ahead, her small hand clutching Snowy. After a moment, she nodded faintly and unbuckled her seatbelt. Ethan helped her out of the car, noticing how small she seemed as she walked beside him, head down, shoulders hunched. They entered the building through a narrow hallway, the scent of wood and fresh paint filling the air. Ethan led her to the elevator and pressed the button to his floor. The doors slid closed, and for a brief moment, the quiet was almost unbearable. When they reached his apartment, Ethan held the door open for her. Inside, the space was simple but warm. Soft lighting, a few comfortable chairs, and a bookshelf lined with old novels. There was a small kitchen in the corner, where the faint smell of coffee still lingered from earlier. Lily stood just inside the door, her eyes wide as she took in her new surroundings. It wasn't like the mansion or the cold, dark hallways of her former home. This place felt different. Safer somehow. Ethan set her suitcase down in the hallway. "Make yourself at home," he said, his voice soft. "I'll get you something to eat. You must be hungry." Lily didn't move, still holding Snowy. Ethan watched her for a moment, then gently walked over to her. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said. "I didn't mean to rush you. You can rest. But when you're ready, we'll talk about what happened, okay?" She nodded, barely a whisper of movement. Ethan gave her a soft smile before heading to the kitchen to make something warm. It was a simple gesture, something his mother had always done for him when he was a child, made him a meal, offered comfort when he least expected it. As he cooked, he couldn't shake the feeling that Cassandra's cruelty wasn't just about the inheritance. There was something deeper, something more dangerous lurking beneath the surface. Ethan had always been able to read people, but Cassandra had always kept her cards close. That look in her eyes as she slammed the door in Lily's face was the same one she'd had when she'd first met Thomas. Like she was only pretending to be something she wasn't. Ethan sighed, setting a bowl of soup down in front of Lily when he returned to the living room. She had sat down on the couch, still clutching Snowy, her legs curled up underneath her. "I made you some soup," he said quietly. "It's not much, but it'll warm you up." Lily looked at the bowl, her small hands shaking as she reached for it. She took a spoonful and ate it slowly, her gaze never leaving the floor. Ethan sat beside her, watching her carefully. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said, his voice firm. "No one's going to hurt you again. I'll make sure of that." Lily's lips trembled, but she didn't speak. She took another bite of soup, and for the first time in days, the tension in her shoulders seemed to ease. The moment was interrupted by the sound of Ethan's phone ringing on the counter. He glanced at it, then turned back to Lily, unsure whether to answer. He walked over, seeing that it was a call from his office. "Excuse me for a second," he said, his voice soft. As he picked up the phone, Lily set the spoon down, her eyes drifting to the window. The rain had stopped, and the sky outside was clear, though dark clouds lingered on the horizon. She thought about her father, about how he used to read her stories every night, his voice soft and comforting. She thought about the promise he had made to always protect her. But now, that promise was broken. She was alone. As Ethan spoke on the phone in the other room, Lily let out a shaky breath and pulled Snowy closer, staring out the window, her mind racing. Where had everything gone wrong? How had it come to this? She didn't know the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't go back. She couldn't let Cassandra win. The next few days felt like a blur. Lily's life had been turned upside down, and yet, in Ethan's apartment, she found a sense of peace she hadn't known in weeks. He kept things simple: soft blankets, warm meals, and quiet evenings spent reading. Slowly, the walls around her heart began to crack, but only just enough for Ethan to see the pain lurking beneath her stillness. He didn't rush her to talk. She wasn't ready, and he knew it. But every now and then, she would ask small questions, soft, uncertain, and Ethan would answer them gently, always careful not to overwhelm her. One morning, about a week after Lily's arrival, Ethan stood in front of the window, coffee in hand, watching the soft light of dawn filter through the city skyline. He hadn't slept much, thinking about the last conversation he'd had with Cassandra. When he first met her, he'd thought she was just another woman trying to climb her way into Thomas's world. But over the years, he had seen how she had wrapped herself around his friend's heart, inch by inch, until she had him completely. At first, she had seemed perfect for Thomas, sophisticated and poised. But now, everything about her felt off. Cassandra's behavior in the days following Thomas's funeral confirmed what Ethan had already suspected. She was after more than just control over the house. There was something deeper at play, something darker. Ethan couldn't put his finger on it yet, but he was determined to uncover the truth. For Lily's sake, and for Thomas's. He owed his late friend that much. He turned as he heard the soft padding of footsteps behind him. Lily was standing in the doorway, her small figure wrapped in one of his old sweaters. Her eyes were puffy from lack of sleep, but she was trying to put on a brave face. "Good morning," Ethan said softly, offering her a smile. "Good morning," she replied, her voice small. She hadn't been talking much. She still clung to Snowy, her silent comfort in this world that felt far too big. But this morning, something was different. She had brushed her hair, and her small hands weren't shaking as much as they had the first day she arrived. "I was thinking about taking you to the park today," Ethan said, his voice light, trying to make the suggestion sound casual. "Maybe we can stop for ice cream afterwards. What do you think?" Her gaze flickered to him, the smallest spark of curiosity lighting up her eyes. "Ice cream?" "Yeah. Chocolate chip, if that's your thing." Lily hesitated for a moment, her fingers nervously tugging at the sleeve of the sweater. I don't remember the last time I had ice cream," she said quietly, almost to herself. Ethan felt a pang in his chest. The weight of her words hit harder than he'd expected. She had been denied so much in such a short time. "Well," he said, pushing aside the lump in his throat, "we'll fix that today." He winked at her, trying to lighten the moment. "It'll be our little tradition. What do you think?" Lily thought about it for a moment, her eyes drifting to the window. The sky was clear now, and the soft morning light was inviting, even if the streets still felt unfamiliar. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said, "but only if we get chocolate chip." "Deal," Ethan said with a smile. After a simple breakfast, they headed out into the city. The crisp air felt good on Lily's skin, and Ethan noticed how she walked a little taller now. It was small, but it was something. She was beginning to trust him, even if she wasn't fully ready to let go of the weight she carried. They made their way to a nearby park, where children ran and played, their laughter filling the air. For a moment, Lily seemed to forget the sadness that had been haunting her. She watched the kids with wide eyes, her attention rapt. Ethan walked beside her, keeping his pace slow so she didn't feel rushed. He glanced down at her every few steps, watching her closely. He was trying to make her feel safe, trying to provide her with a sense of normalcy that had been stripped away from her life so violently. When they reached the ice cream stand, Ethan ordered 2 cones, one for him, one for Lily. The woman behind the counter smiled at them as she handed over the treats, and Lily took hers carefully, still unsure but willing to try. They sat on a bench nearby, and Lily took her first tentative bite of the ice cream. Her eyes widened at the sweetness, and for a brief moment, she smiled. "It's good," she said, her voice small but genuine. "I'm glad you like it," Ethan said, his heart swelling just a little. They sat in silence for a few moments, enjoying their ice cream. Ethan watched the children play in the distance, his thoughts wandering back to the mansion and to Cassandra. There was still so much he didn't know, so much he needed to find out. "Do you think she'll come looking for me?" Lily asked quietly, her voice breaking through his thoughts. She hadn't looked up from her ice cream, but her words were sharp, like a blade pressing into his chest. Ethan hesitated before answering. "I don't know, Lily, but I'm not going to let anything happen to you. You're safe here, I promise." Her fingers gripped Snowy tighter. "I miss Daddy," she whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. "I know you do," he said softly. "I miss him too." Lily finished her ice cream in silence, and after a while, they headed back to the apartment. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the city as they walked back toward the building. For the first time since Lily had arrived, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. But as they entered the building, his phone buzzed in his pocket, and the feeling was quickly replaced by a sharp tension in his gut. He pulled the phone out, seeing the name on the screen, Claire Hammond, his lawyer. He answered quickly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Claire, what's going on?" "It's about the estate," Claire said, her voice serious. "I've been digging into the will and some of the transactions that were made before Thomas's death. There's something you need to see. It's not good." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What did you find?" "Come to the office as soon as you can," Claire said, her voice tight. "You're not going to like this." Ethan felt a knot tighten in his chest. He looked down at Lily, who was sitting on the couch, her eyes focused on her drawing. She had started sketching again, her hands steady as she created lines and shapes. "I'll be right back," he said quietly. "Stay here. I'll bring dinner when I get back." Lily didn't respond, but she nodded, her attention still focused on her drawing. Ethan grabbed his coat and left the apartment. His mind raced, his steps quickening as he headed toward his office. He didn't know what he was walking into, but one thing was certain. Things were about to get much more complicated. Ethan's office was quiet when he arrived, the city's hum muffled behind the thick glass windows. The lights were dim, casting shadows across the floor. Claire Hammond, his lawyer, sat at the desk, papers spread out before her. Her face was serious, lips pressed tightly together as she scanned something on her tablet. Ethan closed the door behind him, his mind racing. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice tight with urgency. Claire looked up from the screen, her eyes darkened with concern. It's about the will, about the trust your friend left behind. Ethan leaned against the desk, his heart pounding in his chest. What's wrong with it? She hesitated, her fingers drumming on the tablet before her. There's something strange here. I started cross-checking the signatures and the transactions Thomas made in the weeks before his death, and, well, there's a series of transfers. Large sums of money sent to an account under a different name. One that doesn't make any sense. Ethan's brows furrowed. What name? Vanessa Blake, Claire said, her voice clipped. Cassandra Morgan's cousin. Ethan's stomach dropped. He'd known Vanessa had been around the house in the weeks leading up to Thomas's death, but he hadn't thought much of it. She had been charming, always offering help with the estate, filling in the gaps where Cassandra couldn't. But now, with Claire's words hanging in the air, Ethan realized just how far the web of manipulation had stretched. Vanessa? Ethan repeated, his voice low with disbelief. Why would Thomas send money to her? Claire clicked a few buttons on the tablet, pulling up the transaction history. It's not just one transfer, Ethan. It's multiple payments over several months. Large sums of money, all marked for personal expenses. The last one was only 2 weeks before Thomas died. Ethan felt a cold pit form in his stomach. You think Cassandra was behind this? Claire nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing. I think it's more than just Cassandra. The timing doesn't add up. These transfers weren't casual. They were meant to conceal something. Ethan leaned back in the chair, rubbing his temples. So, what does this mean for Lily? Claire's eyes softened. It means someone's been siphoning money from the trust, and they've been doing it for a while. The only reason they would do that is if they were preparing for something big, something that would give them full control of everything, including Lily. Ethan stood up quickly, his fists clenched at his sides. I can't believe this. They've been planning this from the beginning. Cassandra didn't just want the estate, she wanted Lily. There's more, Claire continued. I've also looked into Vanessa Blake's background. It's not as clean as she makes it out to be. She has a history of fraud and manipulation, and this is where things get complicated. What do you mean? Claire pulled up a series of documents on the screen. Vanessa wasn't just a cousin or family friend. She was involved in a scheme years ago, money laundering, using fake identities. I didn't want to alarm you, but I think Vanessa and Cassandra are working together. And it's more than just inheritance. It's about control. Ethan's mind spun. Are you telling me this whole thing, Thomas's death, the will, the estate, is part of a bigger plan? Claire didn't answer right away. She stared at the screen, then closed her eyes. I think it's more than that. Someone manipulated Thomas into doing what they wanted. And now they're going after Lily. Ethan felt the weight of those words sink in like a stone. The thought of someone, anyone, taking advantage of Lily was unbearable. She was just a child. She had already lost her father, her home, and now it seemed everything else she knew was being stolen from her. I need to talk to Lily, Ethan said abruptly, his voice sharp. Right now, I need to make sure she's okay. Claire nodded, her expression hardening. I'll start investigating further. We need to gather more evidence before they make their next move. Ethan turned and left the office without another word. The drive back to the apartment felt like it took an eternity, each red light dragging him further from the truth. His mind raced with possibilities. Vanessa's history, Cassandra's coldness, the money transfers. All of it pointed to a conspiracy that Ethan couldn't fully understand yet. But one thing was clear. The danger wasn't over. When he got back to the apartment, the door was slightly ajar. His heart skipped a beat as he stepped inside, the silence of the place suddenly too loud. "Lily," Ethan called out softly. There was no answer. He walked through the apartment, his steps slow and careful, as if stepping into a world that was no longer his own. When he reached the living room, he saw her. Lily was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest, Snowy tucked under her arm. She was staring out the window, her face pale, lost in thought. Ethan knelt in front of her, his hands resting gently on her knees. "Hey," he said softly, his voice warm. "Are you okay?" Lily didn't look at him. She just nodded. But Ethan saw the tightness in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as they gripped Snowy. "Lily," he said, a little more gently this time, "I need you to listen to me. You're safe here. No one is going to hurt you." Her voice was small, barely a whisper. "But they'll come for me, won't they? They always do." Ethan's heart broke at her words. "No, sweetheart, not this time. I'm not going to let that happen." Lily blinked back tears, her small chest rising and falling with silent sobs. She finally looked at him, her eyes wide and filled with a fear Ethan couldn't even begin to understand. "I'm scared," she whispered. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as if his embrace could somehow protect her from everything that was coming. He didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. He was going to fight with everything he had to keep her safe. "I know you're scared," he said, his voice rough. "But I'll take care of you. I promise. I'm not going to let them hurt you." Lily buried her face in his chest, and for a moment, they stayed like that, the world outside forgotten. But Ethan knew the peace wouldn't last long. Cassandra and Vanessa weren't going to back down. They wouldn't stop until they had everything they wanted. And for the first time, Ethan realized just how far they were willing to go. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, meetings, and late nights at his office. Ethan couldn't escape the weight of what he'd learned. But more than that, he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Lily had begun to adjust, slowly. She smiled more now, even laughed a little. But there was a shadow in her eyes that wouldn't go away. Every night, she asked the same question. "Will they come for me again?" And every night, Ethan reassured her that she was safe. But as the days went on, he began to realize that his promises were starting to feel hollow. Cassandra and Vanessa were calculating, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. That evening, as Ethan returned to the apartment, a cold knot formed in his stomach when he saw Claire waiting in the lobby. Her face was tight with worry, and she didn't wait for him to say anything before speaking. "We have a problem," she said, her voice low. "I've been digging deeper into Vanessa and Cassandra. I think they've moved up their timeline." Ethan's heart raced. "What do you mean?" Claire pulled out her phone, showing him a series of documents. "I found something in the paperwork I didn't expect. Vanessa has been using the trust's money to set up a private company. And Cassandra, well, Cassandra's been busy with something else entirely. The real shock, though, is the new will that was signed just before Thomas died. It wasn't his decision." Ethan's hand tightened around the railing. "What do you mean? What's in the will?" Claire hesitated, then swiped to another page. "It says that, in the event of his death, the entirety of the estate goes to Cassandra and her designated beneficiary, Vanessa Blake. Lily's name is nowhere in it." Ethan felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. The very foundation of everything he thought he knew was crumbling. "No," he whispered. "That can't be right." Claire nodded grimly. "I'm afraid it is. And it gets worse. The designated beneficiary clause has some very specific instructions. If something were to happen to Cassandra, everything would automatically transfer to Vanessa." Ethan felt the world spin for a moment. They've been planning this for months. Cassandra knew Thomas was going to die. She set this up. Claire's gaze was sharp, her voice cold. "It's even worse than that. Vanessa's been in contact with some very powerful people. This wasn't just about money. It was always about control, and now they're preparing to move in." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. What does that mean for Lily? Claire's face darkened. "It means they won't stop until they get her. They'll do whatever it takes. And the law's not going to protect her if we don't act fast." Ethan swallowed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a vice. "What do we do?" "I need you to go to the police," Claire said firmly. "They have to know what we're dealing with. We need to make sure Lily is legally protected before they make their move." Ethan nodded, his jaw clenched. "I'll go right now." When he arrived at the police station, the cold, sterile air hit him like a punch. He made his way to the detective's office, his steps quick and purposeful. Detective Maria Santos was waiting for him, her face serious as she gestured for him to sit. She asked, folding her arms, "What can I do for you?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I need to file a restraining order against Cassandra and Vanessa. I have reason to believe they're planning to take Lily away from me." Maria raised an eyebrow. "And what evidence do you have to back that up?" Ethan paused, his mind racing. "I have records. Transactions from the estate, documents I've been able to get through a lawyer. They've been siphoning money and funneling it into a private account. Cassandra has been using Lily as leverage to control the estate. And there's a new will in place, signed under suspicious circumstances." Maria listened carefully, then leaned back in her chair. "Do you have physical evidence that they're directly involved in harming Lily?" Ethan's chest tightened. "I have evidence of financial manipulation, but I don't have physical evidence of abuse. Not yet." The detective nodded slowly. "This is a tricky situation. We'll need to work fast, but we also need proof that they're actively trying to take Lily." Ethan stared at her, frustration mounting. "I don't need to wait for them to hurt her. They're already hurting her." Maria leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "I understand. But we need more than suspicion. If you're going to protect Lily, you need to get that evidence and bring it to me. We'll get a warrant. We'll move quickly. But you have to give us something we can work with." Ethan stood up, feeling the weight of his frustration building. "I will. But if something happens to Lily, if they come after her tonight, what do I do?" Maria stood up with him, her face softening. "You don't need to do this alone. We'll help. But we need you to be patient, Ethan. And we need you to trust the process." Ethan nodded stiffly, then walked out of the station. The chill in the air felt colder now, as though the entire city was holding its breath. He had no time to waste. He had to act, and he had to act fast. Back at the apartment, Lily was waiting by the window, her small figure silhouetted against the city lights. Ethan walked in, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I'm going to be gone for a while. I need you to stay here and stay safe, okay?" Lily turned to him, her eyes tired but steady. Are you going to make them leave? Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to her and knelt down. I'm going to make sure nothing happens to you, he said, his voice firm but gentle. I'll be back soon. Just stay here, and don't worry. Lily nodded, her grip on Snowy tightening. Okay. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then stood up. I'll be right back. As he closed the door behind him, he felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. He wasn't sure how much longer he could protect her, how much longer the law would take to act. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let Cassandra and Vanessa win. Not now, not ever. Here brings us to the end of the story. But what happens next? Will Ethan be able to protect Lily from the grasp of Cassandra and Vanessa? What's their next move? If you want to know what happens next, comment Part 2 below. Make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Your support helps these stories reach more people. Stay tuned, and as always, thanks for watching.